terrorists with deadly chemical weapons. That's a nightmare that many leaders are fearing, but it could be closer to reality than you think.
Syria has the largest stockpile of chemical weapons in the Middle East, and if terrorists grab them, they can unleash them anywhere in the world, including the United States. Chris Mitchell has the story.
The horrific fighting in Syria pits bitter rivals against each other.
You have already two kinds of very dangerous Islamist terrorist forces in Syria. On the one hand, the al-Qaeda jihadis who we were talking about. Of course, on the other hand, fighting with the regime or backing the regime, Hezbollah and the Iranian Revolutionary Guards Corps.
In the midst of the chaos, Israeli and Western experts fear the wrong group might capture depots with Assad's most deadly weapons. These satellite photos show a chemical weapons site near Homs and a Scud missile base. Syria is reported to have the largest stockpile of chemical weapons in the Middle East, along with missiles to deliver them. Missiles that can reach every part of Israel. That could spell trouble if those weapons fall into the wrong hands. The Middle East is no stranger to chemical weapons. Iraq used them against the Iranians in the 1980s and against Kurdish Iraqis in 1991. And Assad's father used them against Muslim Brotherhood protesters in 1982. Here in Israel, senior officials are keeping close watch on Syria's chemical weapons. Israel's deputy chief of staff said Assad could use chemical weapons on Israel, as some say he's already used against his own people. But what if Syria's weapons fall into other hands, like al-Qaeda? Former senior military intelligence officer Jacques Naria says al-Qaeda would have nothing to lose by attacking Israel with chemical weapons.
They have everything to gain by creating havoc and hurting Israel.
Syria expert Jonathan Spire says Assad could also try to pass the weapons onto Hezbollah, which is headquartered in Lebanon.
It's very likely that if and when things start to look like they're entering the end game, then I think it's most probable that Assad will start to move that kind of stuff over to Lebanon.
But Spire says the West will try to stop that from happening.
We're hearing reports that the West would consider the possibility of military intervention, perhaps on the pretext or ostensibly to stop massacres and for human rights, to defend human rights, but really in order to get their hands on those stockpiles as quick as possible and to stop them from falling into the hands of terrorists.
And one reason for that, if terrorists like al-Qaeda do get a hold of those weapons, they could aim for other targets aside from Israel, including some like Europe or the United States.
Any appropriation of chemical weapons by al-Qaeda is not limited to the Syrian theater, because al-Qaeda would export it to some other places. This is a global threat.
Chris Mitchell, CBN News, Jerusalem.
You know, the voices here that just cry out for intervention, we don't know what we're talking about. You see, Assad is a member of an Alawite sect. It's a small sect of Muslims. It does not represent the majority Sunnis. It does not represent even the Shia. It's an offshoot. And he is ruled by terror, but his father did, Hafez al-Assad. But this guy doesn't quite know what to do. But he realizes, and the rest of us should realize, that if they lose power, who takes in and fills the void? And that's the danger, that if these radical groups come in, so you say, well, let's back the rebels. Well, which rebels? And under what circumstances, and what will they do if we back them? So it's one of those explosive things that could bring terrible reckoning to the whole world. Well, Lee Webb has the rest of our top stories in today's news. Lee?
Pat, congressional Republicans say they're still willing to negotiate an agreement with Attorney General Eric Holder, but only if the White House turns over more emails and memos related to the Fast and Furious gun tracking operation. A House committee voted along party lines to hold the Attorney General in contempt of Congress. John Waggy has more now on the impasse.
Chairman Darrell Issa said there would be no need for a hearing if his committee could just see the documents related to the Fast and Furious scandal. Documents Holder refuses to give them.
Our purpose has never been to hold the Attorney General in contempt. Our purpose has always been to get the information the committee needs to complete its work that it is not only entitled to, but obligated to do.
Republicans say the nation needs to know why the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Firearms allowed guns to be transferred across the U.S.-Mexican border, resulting in the death of border agent Brian Terry.
I hope we have the guts and the perseverance to get to the bottom of this. We have nearly 2,000 weapons purposely given to drug cartels. We have hundreds of dead people in Mexico. We have a dead United States Border Patrol agent. And we have a government that's withholding information so that we can not only get to the bottom of it, but that we can fix it and make sure that it never ever happens again.
Democrats say the committee is on a witch hunt, and they complain about the treatment of Eric Holder.
In all of my 30 years of being in the United States Congress, the way that he was treated when he was here testifying before this committee, I must admit, I've never seen anybody treated in that fashion.
President Obama's decision to use executive privilege on Holder's behalf raises new questions for some committee members concerning what the president knew about the gun-running scandal and when he knew it.
If he was not part of the drafting of the February 4th letter, if he did not know about Fast and Furious before Brian Terry was murdered, if he did not approve of the wiretap applications, then what in the world is he asserting executive privilege for?
John Waggy, CBN News.
Good question, Pat.
Lee, it sure is, and I tell you, the president can't answer it. When he was a senator, he actually went public against any claim of executive privilege. He said, you know, the White House needs to be transparent. Well, he's anything but transparent. You ask, what are they possibly trying to hide? That's what you can't understand. Is there somebody in the lower level of the Justice Department that made a mistake? Well, okay, big deal. But he doesn't want the people to find out. I just don't understand it. Executive privilege, this is nonsense. Lee?
Pat, don't look for the economy to improve this year. That's the message from the Federal Reserve Board. The Fed has cut its forecast for economic growth for the rest of 2012, and it expects unemployment to hold around 8%. The Fed plans to keep interest rates low. The idea there, of course, is to encourage more borrowing and spending in hopes of stimulating the economy. Will that work, Pat?
No, it won't. Borrowing and spending by the government won't do it. I was reading Gary Schilling. He has an insight that he does a lengthy paper, and I appreciate what he has to say, but he is of the opinion that we're in a long-term downward cycle, and that no amount of government stimulus is going to be adequate to overcome the forces that are at work in the world economy. He thinks that house prices are going to go down another 20%, and he sees, I think, S&P at about 800, so he sees the stock market taking a real dive before it recovers. He thinks it'll recover, but as I read it, what he sees are secular forces at work throughout the whole system. And so you've got trouble in China, you've got trouble in India, you've got trouble in Southeast Asia, you've got trouble in, of course, big trouble in Europe, and we have trouble here in America. And apparently all of the money that's been spent on these various stimulus packages have not worked. But nothing's going to work as long as in numbers of regulators. I read something else yesterday I thought was very interesting. The private sector has been hiring almost nobody. Employment has been almost stagnant. Interestingly enough, the segment of our economy that has been growing rapidly has been the growth of federal workers, and the particular federal workers that are in the regulatory agencies, in charge of regulating business. And they have almost doubled the rate of growth in the private sector. Now, what does that tell you? It tells you that we've got a government out of control that thinks their job is to hurt business. Instead of helping business and helping business create jobs, they are hurting business and fixing it so business can't hire. So take it from what it says, and a very eminent economist, I concur with what he had to say about this. So in any event, happy days are ahead for America, but count about 10 or 12 years down the road. Lee?
The Pentagon plans to honor gay and lesbian service members this month. The move coincides with Gay Pride Month, and it comes just 9 months after the military began allowing homosexuals to serve openly. Details of the plan are still being worked out, but a spokesman says now that we've repealed Don't Ask, Don't Tell, Defense Secretary Leon Panetta feels it's important to find a way this month to recognize the service and professionalism of gay and lesbian troops. On our CBN Newswatch program, I spoke to Robert McGinnis of the Family Research Council. He's also a retired Army lieutenant colonel and is critical of the Pentagon's move.
I am concerned about the conformity to military standards because, after all, the military is about removing those distinctions and fighting and being prepared to fight across the world as one type of unit. If homosexuals want to parade their homosexuality as their defining characteristic of who they are, rather than that they're a soldier or a sailor, then that's dysfunctional.
McGinnis says it undermines unit cohesion and morale in the military. Well, summer is officially here, and it's off to a record-breaking start. From coast to coast, extreme heat is gripping our nation. 48 states are forecast to have 90-degree weather until Saturday.
We're forecasting above normal temperatures for most of the country, especially into the central states where there's been expanding drought, and especially in the Southwest, which has been suffering through a very rough wildfire season.
A high school graduation in Connecticut turned into a mass casualty event. At least 15 people passing out from the heat there. More than 18 ambulances had to be called in, and even the animals are suffering. Tigers at the National Zoo in Washington were given meat-flavored popsicles. Hopefully they're not doing that in New York at the zoo there, Pat, because if Mayor Michael Bloomberg hears about that, they're going to pass some sort of ordinance to outlaw meat-flavored popsicles.
And meat-flavored, supersized Coca-Colas. We can't give that to those tigers either. They might get fat.
No winner has been declared in Egypt's bitter presidential election. The results were supposed to be announced today, but allegations of fraud have put that on hold. Both the Muslim Brotherhood candidate and his opponent, who served in the government of Hosni Mubarak, have claimed victory. An announcement may come in the next few days. The Southern Baptist Convention has voted to adopt an alternative name for churches that feel the title Southern Baptist might be a turnoff to potential believers. The alternative title is Great Commission Baptists. Supporters of the name say it will help missionaries and new churches reach more people. An online poll found that 44% said knowing a church was Southern Baptist would make them less likely to visit or join. Well, you can always get the latest from CBN News by going to our website at cbnnews.com